This is Stone Wallace, author of the upcoming biography, George Raft, the Man Who Would Be Bogart. Herewith, the George Raft story. George Raft's film career possesses all the elements of a Hollywood success story turned sour. At his height during the 1930s and into the mid-1940s, George Raft was one of the movie industry's biggest box office draws. During his 3 years at Warner Brothers from 1939 to 1942, he was reportedly offered more film roles than any other actor on the lot, including James Cagney. The great director John Huston recalled, "Everything was intended for George Raft at that time," though Huston was quick to add, "and I was not among George Raft's greatest admirers." Raft apparently was every bit as tough as his famous screen image. Jimmy Cagney called him the only really tough man I knew in Hollywood. Studio chief Jack L. Warner remembered, "There was a time when Raft was tougher on the set than any gangster he was playing on film." Quite a tribute from two men who had spent a lifetime dealing with rough characters both on and off the screen. Yet sadly, Raft's placement as a great in movie history has today been overshadowed by the missed opportunities that removed him from public consciousness and confined him to a virtual cinematic oblivion. While contemporaries James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, and Edward G. Robinson have become screen icons, George Raft, perhaps the most authentic tough guy of them all, has been relegated to mere footnote status. His sartorial splendor, mysterious public posture, and somewhat sinister appearance with a striking resemblance to the late heartthrob Rudolph Valentino soon brought Raft to the attention of director Roland Brown, who cast the fledgling actor for authenticity in his upcoming production Quick Millions. In the film, Raft had the role of Jimmy Kirk, the bodyguard to racketeer Bugs Raymond, played by Spencer Tracy in his second picture. Other small hoodlum parts followed, though the work was undemanding and Raft's bits could have been played by any studio contract player. Outside of a brief scene as James Cagney's dance contest rival in Taxi, Raft's career really wasn't progressing very far. It was his incomparable Broadway image that afforded him his next big screen opportunity, one that would provide George Raft with his primary screen identification for the next 50 years. Howard Hawks, director of such hits as The Dawn Patrol and The Criminal Code, had first met Raft at a prize fight and remembered him when casting for the Howard Hughes production of Scarface. Hawks thought Raft ideal for the secondary role of Gino Rinaldo, the coin-flipping bodyguard gunman of Paul Muni's Tony Camonte. Hawks knew of Raft's background and shady associations, and used Raft's knowledge to further enhance the authenticity of his film, giving Scarface a stark, vividly violent realism missing in Hollywood's two previous gangland entries, Little Caesar and The Public Enemy. Raft himself scored so powerfully in the role that he emerged as the film's prime beneficiary. Even today, it is he who has become identified with the gangster menace of Scarface, more so than the movie's star. As a result of his success, several studios offered movie deals. Raft chose to sign a lifetime contract with Paramount Pictures, who, though delighted with their new acquisition, were unsure of what to do with him. Raft's most profitable screen image was as a hoodlum or gangster, and Adolph Zucker's studio was no Warner Brothers. Thus began Raft's most absurd period in motion pictures. Paramount vacillated wildly in trying to promote Raft to audiences. A Valentino approach with a bullfighting theme in The Trumpet Blows, dance pictures such as Bolero and Rumba, intended to capitalize on Raft's pre-Hollywood success, musicals like Every Night at 8, comedies such as She Couldn't Take It, even the body historical piece, The Bowery, co-starring Wallace Beery and Jackie Cooper. Perhaps Raft's greatest success during his early years at Paramount was in his first starring role, Night After Night, a movie Raft admitted was stolen from him by his co-star that he himself had recommended, Mae West, in her screen debut. Of course, Raft did appear in crime pictures, such as Dancers in the Dark, All of Me, Limehouse Blues, where he was miscast as an Asian, and the first film based on Dashiell Hammett's The Glass Key. But when he was offered the role of the notorious gangster Trigger in The Story of Temple Drake, based on the controversial William Faulkner novel Sanctuary, he refused because of the repellent nature of the part, and initiated the first of a record 22 suspensions at the studio. Jack LaRue, a hitherto undervalued actor, landed the part. Ironically, this big break proved LaRue's career plateau as he subsequently returned to minor roles, mainly playing the hood in crime dramas. As an interesting side note, in later years LaRue claimed to have been Howard Hawks' first choice for the role of Gino Rinaldo in Scarface, but that director Hawks felt he projected too much authority to be accepted as Paul Muni's henchman. LaRue was subsequently dismissed, but not before suggesting George Raft as his replacement. Could this have happened? Possibly, but it is somewhat difficult to imagine an actor hungry for stardom so graciously introducing his own competition. George Raft, meanwhile, no longer wanted to be seen as a criminal on screen. When in 1937 he was asked by director William Wyler to play slum-bred gangster babyface Martin in his film production of the hit Broadway play Dead End, Raft turned down the part and was substituted by Humphrey Bogart, who had just scored a hit as the Dillinger-like gunman Duke Mantee in Warner Brothers' The Petrified Forest. Raft wanted audiences to accept him as a decent and heroic character, and was provided with the opportunity in Henry Hathaway's Souls at Sea. Raft initially rejected the co-starring role of Powda because he objected to the character's death. However, when Lloyd Nolan and Anthony Quinn were considered as replacements, Raft changed his mind. Raft captured audience sympathy when he goes down with the ship at the film's climax, his sacrifice motivated by romanticism and to ensure the survival of his friend and government agent, played by Gary Cooper. The success of Souls at Sea prompted Henry Hathaway to again acquire Raft's services for a follow-up adventure tale. Spawn of the North teamed George with Henry Fonda in an exciting story about pirates attempting to muscle in on the Alaskan salmon fishing industry. While Raft's role was not entirely sympathetic, his character redeems himself at the end by crashing his pirated vessel into a mass of icebergs. Spawn of the North would be Raft's last successful film at Paramount. Following the failures of You and Me, directed by Fritz Lang, and The Ladies from Kentucky, Raft signed with Warner Brothers, where in 1939 he co-starred with his old pal James Cagney in the powerful prison picture Each Dawn I Die. The movie provided Raft with one of his best roles since Scarface, as the tough but honorable convict Hood Stacy. Raft followed this success with Invisible Stripes, where he played an ex-con attempting to go straight. Co-starring for the first time with Humphrey Bogart, Raft also shared the screen with William Holden, fresh from his film debut in Golden Boy. Raft hoped to escape criminal typecasting, but Warner's was a studio that specialized in gangster dramas, and Raft had been featured in underworld roles in his first two pictures there. He was given a temporary reprieve in the exciting They Drive By Night, where he and Humphrey Bogart played truck-driving brothers, contending with crooked bosses and a murderous idol Lupino. Recognizing an exciting pairing, Warner's next wanted to partner Raft with Lupino in their version of W. R. Burnett's book High Sierra, but Raft said no. He neither wanted to play another criminal nor die at the end, overlooking the fact that he had just done both in The House Across the Bay, for which he had asked Warner's to lend him to United Artists. After other names were considered for the role of the aging grassroots bank bandit Mad Dog Roy Earl, including Paul Muni and even a youthful John Garfield, Humphrey Bogart was assigned the part and took another major career leap thanks to George Raft. But there may have been more to the story. It has been rumored that Bogart was so eager to land the plum part that he employed devious tactics to convince Raft not to accept the role, including appealing to Raft's ego by insisting he was too big a star to play a role in which he dies and loses the girl. Perhaps Raft discovered Bogart's clever manipulation, for when Bogart was next announced as Raft's co-star in Manpower, Raft used his power at the studio to veto him. Edward G. Robinson was cast in the lead role in this working man drama, while Marlene Dietrich was signed as the romantic interest, a hard-boiled dame who loves Raft but marries Robinson. Well-publicized tensions erupted on the set, culminating in a fistfight between the two male leads. Raft's troubles with Warner Brothers continued when he next refused the role of Sam Spade in the studio's third remake of the Dashiell Hammett classic The Maltese Falcon. Raft reputedly was not comfortable working with first-time director John Huston, and also was not enamored of the character, which he termed wishy-washy. Huston was delighted with Raft's withdrawal from the project and cast his personal choice, Humphrey Bogart, in the first major starring role of his career. Bogart complained that he had pinch-hitted for Raft throughout the early 1940s, appearing in such Raft rejects as It All Came True, The Big Shot, and All Through the Night. Bogart's compliance finally paid off when he was given the role of nightclub owner Rick Blaine in Casablanca. While Raft in later years claimed he turned the part down because he was uncomfortable with the tint of ex-gangsterism in the character, Warner's insiders claimed that the role was always intended for Bogart, who after years of patient servitude in conventional roles had finally been allowed to show his versatility in The Maltese Falcon. Instead of taking part in one of the greatest movies ever made, Raft went to Universal, where he starred in the semi-autobiographical Broadway, before returning to Warner's to make Background to Danger. An exciting espionage story, Raft ended his Warner Brothers pact after completing the film, and according to Jack Warner, paid $10,000 for release from his contract, money which the studio owed him. Raft was now free to choose the projects he believed were right for him, However, he quickly proved to be a far worse judge of acceptable scripts than either Adolph Zukor or Jack Warner. When famed director Billy Wilder approached Raft about appearing opposite Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity, based on the novel by James N. Cain, Raft insisted the director read the script to him, and then asked Wilder seriously when the murderous insurance salesman would flash open his badge to reveal that he was actually a detective. At that point, Wilder knew Raft had no concept of the role and dismissed the notion of using him, choosing instead the unlikely Fred MacMurray, whose subsequent career took on a whole new dimension thanks to the film. While rival Humphrey Bogart now reigned as king of the Warner's lot, Raft began his inevitable career descent by appearing in a series of mediocre films for such lesser studios as RKO and United Artists. With his stubborn insistence on continually playing the good guy, his pictures quickly became monotonous for audiences. In addition, Raft had begun to receive bad publicity stemming from his association with gangster Bugsy Siegel. For the first time in his Hollywood career, the aging former movie tough guy was finding it difficult to obtain employment. Raft finally signed a 3-picture deal with Lippert Pictures to appear in European-made features. While Raft's name had begun to fade in Hollywood, his former screen reputation and now bargain price made him a valuable asset to overseas producers. In 1952, Raft appeared in the crime drama Loan Shark, following it up with I'll Get You, and in 1953, Lippert again utilized his services for The Man from Cairo. Sadly, his European ventures did little to revive interest in Raft's Hollywood career. Audiences were not much interested in seeing Raft as a police lieutenant in the glossy mystery Black Widow, nor did they tune in their television sets to watch his entry into the medium as I Am the Law. Where Raft did briefly shine during the decade was in 2 bona fide hits that ironically, if not surprisingly, cast him in supporting roles as a gangster: Rogue Cop and Billy Wilder's classic comedy Some Like It Hot. Despite its immense popularity, Some Like It Hot proved to be the climax of Raft's career as a featured player. During the making of the film, he was heard to lament that, unlike Bogart and Cagney, he was once again the victim of typecasting. After another stint as a detective in the forgotten pre-airport disaster non-epic Jet Over the Atlantic, Raft's movie career was virtually over. Television, the end of the studio star system, and Raft's own poor choices were all factors in his decline. In addition, his personal press continued to work against him. In 1965, he was indicted for income tax evasion, and was later barred from England, where he had served as host of the Colony Club due to his past associations. When he did work, he was relegated to cameos or walk-ons for sympathetic pals such as Jerry Lewis and Frank Sinatra, as well as various independents who exploited the actor for camp value, as in For Those Who Think Young and the mega disaster Casino Royale. His last 2 movies, Sextet with Mae West in her final film appearance, and The Man with Bogart's Face with bogey lookalike Robert Saatchi, reflected the irony of George Raft's former screen stardom. George Raft died of a respiratory ailment in November 1980. Although he had earned millions of dollars throughout his career, in his final years he relied upon the generous support of his more affluent friends, including Frank Sinatra. Concerning his poor financial state, Raft once explained, "Part of the loot went for gambling, part for horses, and a part for women. The rest I spent foolishly." While Raft himself could be blamed for never reaching the legendary status enjoyed by Bogart, Cagney, Robinson, and others of his era, he left this world regretting very few of the choices he made.